Dr. Angie, how are you doing?
Hi, Ivan. I'm doing fine. How are you?
I'm fantastic, and I feel so privileged and honored to have this opportunity to do this video with you. I've been following you for, well, since we first met on Instagram, and so, yeah, I'm just excited to do this with you, and I thank you for taking the time.
Well, thank you very much for the interview.
So I just wanted to give our audience a little bit of background as far as how we met. So first I found you on Instagram. I think it was just kind of natural course of, plant-based tags and so forth. And when I saw your picture, I was like, wait, what? Really? Because I saw like your avatar and you just have this great physique. And then when I saw your qualifications, I was just like so blown away. I was like, it was such a rare, unique, incredible combination, because you have such a profound background. You're a board certified gastroenterologist. You're a medical doctor, and you're also possess this fantastic physique, and obviously it's you attribute that a lot to your plant-based lifestyle as well as everything else, as far as your
Yes.
knowledge. So I just wanted to let people know as far as how we met, and I started following you first. And then to my surprise, I saw like a little while later you started following me, and I was just like so flattered and like also like just like wow, like that's so unbelievable. And yeah, and then that's kind of how we met. And the thing I think that really led this collaboration was when you posted one of your videos on Instagram, and you said that that you needed to have 100 subscribers to be able to post the URL, the YouTube link for that video. And then I commented and said that let's see, I said that, well, hello, I have almost 8,000 subs. I would like to help you get more subs. Maybe we could do a collaboration video. And then I had like the little wink and smile and fist bump emoji. And then you just replied and said, let's do it, with a smiley face. And so here we are.
I love it.
Yeah, so and then the thing about it too was cool was that it was like this interesting dichotomous relationship with our social media. Like you have a large following on Instagram, and like over 9,500 followers, but on YouTube you have, I think just now you have about 194, and then on my Instagram I have like 340-ish followers, but on my YouTube I have 8,000 subs. So it's like we can like help each other here. You know what I mean?
Definitely.
It's pretty cool.
Absolutely.
But
It is.
yes, I think that for me it's more about this interview, just the knowledge that you have and just everything about it. I just think it was like just this like grand opportunity, and so I thank you again.
My pleasure.
All right, so just
Yes, I think it's all about just adding value and helping people understand the whole food plant-based lifestyle.
yeah, without a doubt. And so with that, let's just go ahead and dive right into the first question I have for you. And so just can you please share with us what you do for a living, and also
Yes.
your academic background, schooling and everything?
Sure. So I'm double boarded in internal medicine and gastroenterology. So that means I specialize in treating the digestive disease system from mouth to anus. It's a very long tube, and all the digestive processes that are involved and all the organs that are involved, including the liver and the pancreas.
Wow, that's impressive. So where did you go to school? Like what was your undergrad and then post-grad?
Yeah, so my undergrad was at University of California, Irvine, in Orange County, California, close to home. For medical school, I attended Ross University School of Medicine in the island of Dominica. For internship, I attended the Cleveland Clinic in Florida. For residency, which was 2 years, I was at University of Southern California, or USC. For postdoctoral fellowship in stem cell research, I was again at USC Keck School of Medicine, and for clinical GI fellowship, I stayed at USC. So I was at USC for the latter part of my educational experience. residency, fellowship, and all of that.
Wow. So I guess just to sum that up, how many total years of schooling was that, would you say, roughly?
I'd say just about under 15 years.
Wow, that's impressive. That is very impressive. Wow. Yeah, and we'll probably link up, and we'll put all your links on this video so people can get more information about you. But that was impressive, and this is the first time I've heard this from you. So thank you for sharing that. That's quite impressive. So.
My pleasure.
So let's talk about, I guess, what we came here to talk about, and it's the big macronutrient, or I should say the forgotten macronutrient, fiber. And so what I wanted to talk about is kind of what we talked about it being a health modulator. And correct me if I'm wrong here, but I guess my impression of fiber is that it slows down the GI transit, kind of like it, which lowers the blood sugar response, right? In the
Absolutely.
GI transit, but in the colonic transit, it actually can.
Yes, you said something, you mentioned two very important things. Number one, you said the forgotten macronutrient. Let's expand on that.
Yes.
In the last few years, the obsession has been about protein. First, it started with fats, low-fat diets, and then the enemy was the carbohydrates, and people stopped eating carbs, and then the obsession became with protein. So over the past few years, people have been so obsessed with cutting out carbs, or increasing protein, or cutting down fat, that they've forgotten the most important macronutrient of all, which is actually the fiber that comes from eating carbohydrates.
Correct.
So that is very key, what you said, the forgotten nutrient. So let's make sure that everyone who's watching this episode understands that the fiber is just such an important nutritional ingredient in food, and without fiber, we will be sick. The GI tract will be ill, and that'll translate to illnesses, multiple illnesses, because literally that's how you get nutrients with the fiber. That's how you get your GI tract working properly. That's how you feed the gut bacteria.
Wow.
So let's just make sure, people who are watching this, that the fiber is a forgotten macronutrient, and it shouldn't be. I was listening to one of the fiber experts who's doing most of the leading research in fiber, and she said that they've brought down the minimum fiber intake down to 15 grams a day, and Americans aren't even coming close to that. They're getting like half of
Wow.
that because of fast food, because of the standard American diets. We're not even getting 15, and that's like the bare minimum you should hit. If you want to be super healthy, you should get between 50 and 80 grams a day, right? And that's what you and I get, Yvonne, because we eat a whole food plant-based diet without even thinking about it. That's what we get. But imagine they've brought down the bare minimum requirements to 15 grams a day, and Americans aren't even hitting that, which is just crazy to me. So thank you for saying the words, the forgotten macronutrient, and so let's change that right now, right here, right now. Let's not do that. Let's talk about fiber. So I'm glad we're talking about fiber right now.
Oh yeah, and quite frankly, I was a little concerned that we would be kind of like limited on discussion, but I think fiber is almost like an entire book, because there's so many different applications, as far as, because most people think it just has to do with regularity, but like you said, it feeds our gut bacteria, and then we're going to get into how it actually kind of naturally helps. It's a modulator in a sense. It actually helps balance things out.
Right.
And so
yes, let's talk about that. That's very important. In the disorders of the GI tract, so when someone's having diarrhea, okay, for stool bulking, you can treat them with fiber. And so the diarrhea goes away and they have a stool bulking experience. For example, in patients with irritable bowel syndrome, with diarrhea predominance, fiber is helpful. Let's take patients with constipation. People who are having severe constipation, you add fiber to their diet, and suddenly they basically have more regularity. So it's this magical nutrient. It's the only one that I know of that can do that. That can normalize the GI tract when people are having diarrhea, and it can also normalize the GI tract when they're having constipation. For example, if you're having diarrhea, you go to the store and try to buy a medicine, for constipation, you would get some Dulcolax, but then you go overboard and have diarrhea when you take the
Right.
Dulcolax, or it may not work very well. If you're having diarrhea, you would go get some Imodium, and then you go all the way to the other side of the spectrum, and you get constipated, and it may not even work. So basically, these medicines on the counter, over the counter, they take you to extremes. They have side effects, and then here's fiber that just naturally comes with food that can regulate your GI tract and regulate your system, where it can neutralize the diarrhea or the constipation and make you regular. And there's a lot that we still don't know about fiber, and all of that is being investigated, but part of that could be the fact that fiber can act as, via osmosis, it can act as a hydrating system where it takes more water into your stool and hydrates the stool, whereas if that fiber wasn't there, it would have ended up reabsorbed through your small bowel into your blood system. So that's one way, for example, fiber can regulate you by bringing water into the stool through osmosis. Fiber also has capabilities of stimulating the GI tract, where the GI tract actually moves. And that's brilliant. It's just, when you try to get the same effect from stimulant laxatives like Dulcolax, it has so many side effects and so many problems. But with fiber, you don't get that problem. Also, what happens is fiber basically has all these nutrients attached to it. So as it travels through the small bowel, where most of the nutrients get absorbed, it slowly releases these nutrients into the blood system through the brush borders of the GI tract. So the GI tract is this long tube, and the small bowel is responsible for absorbing all the nutrients, right? So fiber has all these nutrients attached to it and slowly releases these nutrients into the small bowel to the brush borders of the GI tract, and the brush borders are like, okay, got it, and slowly absorb these things in. So with this fiber, the GI tract has the ability to take its time, if you will, and slowly absorb these nutrients. Now, that's with all the calcium, potassium, all the electrolytes, and all the basically all the other vitamins and minerals. But it also has a role in helping us regulate the insulin and the glycemic index, which is basically sugar-insulin interplay. When fiber is releasing sugar into the GI, into this blood system, it has a way of regulating it where you don't get bombarded with a lot of sugar suddenly. A good example of that is, for example, if you ate an orange, okay, in entirety, and chewed the fiber, the outside, and ate it as a whole, and that the glycemic index will be way different as if compared to if you drank orange juice, which is basically devoid of fiber. So fiber is very important in regulating the blood sugar. And which you alluded to, which I think is very important.
Thank you so much, Dr. Angie. That was, whoa, that was a lot of, I mean, I almost feel like we could stop the interview right now. It was so good what you just said. Everything you said was unbelievable. I mean, it's like an interview, like, that was incredible.
Thank you.
And I think, yeah, and I think that, like you said, like, I think that's also the reason why when you take a fruit and you juice it, you're stripping the fiber, and how a fruit juice on its own, especially when it's consumed in excess, it doesn't have that barrier or that the fiber to help to kind of slow things down, and so
Yes.
I wanted to just kind of I guess reiterate what you said there. I also what really stood out to me was the brush borders, and how you said the fiber feeds, like it has nutrients. We always think fiber kind of reduces absorption of nutrients, and perhaps to some extent, but I think that there may actually be a positive benefit to that, and we're going to get into that a little later. But that was an interesting element. It's almost like a bus driver dropping off people at different bus stops. So that's kind of the analogy that popped in my head when you talked about fiber,
Yes.
how it feeds.
I love that analogy.
It kind of like
Yes,
slowly
it is.
feeds certain locations with certain like kind of like a bus. It's dropping off people at different locations. You know, think of the people as like the nutrients.
Yes.
It's amazing. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
That's
such a good analogy. I should use that in my
scoops
clinic.
up the people, and then it slowly like releases them in a different location. Or it's amazing.
Yes. Absolutely, because remember, the stomach doesn't do much about, the stomach doesn't absorb nutrients. It's mostly in this, most of it, 99% of it is in the small bowel. So the stomach kind of just emulsify things, slowly sends it into the small bowel, and then think of this food or this partially digested food as the bus. And the bus driver just kind of being the bus, and the bus driver being the fiber, and slowly releasing the nutrients as it comes to the peaks and valleys of the small bowel, which are called the brush borders.
Wow, this is all new to me, but I'm like fiber right now. I'm just soaking it up. Okay, so the colonic transit increase. That's interesting. They talk about how fiber, and this is, correct me if I'm wrong, please, but that it could potentially reduce cancer risk because, like colon cancer, because it almost reduces the contact time or exposure of potential toxic substances to the inner lining of the colon. So fiber kind of keeps it moving rather than when you're constipated, it slows down that colonic transit time. And so you have more potential exposure to, you know, byproducts that may be toxic perhaps.
Absolutely. I mean, if you think about why we don't have a lot of small bowel GI cancers, right? There are very, very, very few people that ever die of a small bowel GI cancer. But so many people, actually, colon cancer is the second biggest cancer killer in the United States. So you think about, well, what's the difference between the small bowel and the large bowel? The difference is this: the small bowel doesn't really hold on to stool. So the small bowel most of the time is just basically passes things by, passes things through, absorbs the nutrients, and things go into the colon, and that's where the reservoir is. That's where the stool sits until the bowel excretes it. So the contact time of the mucosa with the stool is so much higher in the colon than it is in the small bowel. So that's probably why we have more colon cancer than small bowel cancer, and that's been theorized. So then the other point you brought up is, so is that why we have, fiber helps? Yes, studies have shown that high fiber diets have basically help you be at lower risk for colon cancer. And that's probably because fiber helps stimulate the GI tract and increases the transit time of the stool in the colon. So if the things are passing through quickly, now think about the bus moving slowly through the small bowel to give the nutrients to the blood, and then slows down when it gets to the large bowel, right? The bus is going slowly, slowly through the small bowel to basically drop off the passengers, but in the colon it moves rather faster than if we didn't have fiber, right? So it stimulates the colon to go fast, so that stool material, that fecal material, is not sitting in the colon releasing toxins to the mucosa and exposing the mucosa to damaging toxins, which would lead to DNA mutation and cancer, right? So when you have fiber in your stool, when you have fiber in your diet, it stimulates the colon and you have regular bowel movements. So yes, that's probably how fiber helps by stimulating the GI tract, by making your bowel movements regular and your GI tract regular, and increasing the transit time.
Yes, absolutely. And I wanted to ask you, when you said about how fiber stimulates, movement, or is it called peristalsis? Is that what it is? I think there's two kinds, or is that the right? Yeah, that's like
yes. No, peristalsis is actually correct. Peristalsis is the movement of the colon or any part of the GI tract where basically by squeezing it pushes things through. But we don't know exactly how fiber does that. We think that it could be through it could be hormonal, it could be the nervous system, it could be because of the gut bacteria. It's not known exactly how it's done, but we do know that it has a stimulating effect. It's just the exact mechanism is unknown.
I love that about
time.
you. As knowledgeable as you are, and I kind of take this same step back, kind of humble approach in that, there's still a lot that we don't know, and I think it's very, very admirable and refreshing because we're excited about what we do know, and often even if we don't know what we I think that kind of being prudent and kind of going with common sense, if you will, and kind of general well recommended guidelines, they're out there for a reason. So I definitely appreciate you being honest in that way, because and it's fascinating, and we will learn more, but as you know, there's always going to be something new to learn too.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
moving on, I wanted to talk about fiber modulation and its optimizing absorption balance of nutrition. And what I mean by that is, at least I think that it helps prevent overabsorption. Like for instance, and maybe this isn't related to fiber, but this is the benefits of a plant-based diet, if you will. So we might actually kind of, focus on like going away from fiber, in that plants have non-heme iron, and I believe that they don't have heme iron. That's mainly in red meat. That's the kind of and
That's correct.
The research, and people would say, oh well, you're not getting bioavailable iron with non-heme iron. Well, they're finding that there's increased risk of certain health problems with heme iron. And I think and one of them may actually be colon cancer risk, and it could be an association with red meat. But nonetheless, heme iron is within red meat, and and there's enough, I guess evidence or speculation, if you will, to kind of raise awareness about that. But I think non-heme iron, I think getting enough calories and having a balanced diet, but non-heme iron tends to kind of prevent the overabsorption of iron. That's the way I see it. I mean, it used to be looked at. It used to be looked at negatively because we weren't getting a bioavailable source of iron. But I mean, why do we need? I think in this day and age, I mean, it's almost like we're absorbing too much. Like people are absorbing too much nutrition. We have an obesity crisis.
Right. Yeah. You're absolutely correct. Because in the past, we thought that, well, all iron is the same. But now we know that that's not true, because initial studies showed that higher levels of iron help the cardiovascular system, and it's better for your cardiovascular system. Well, great, but that was the initial findings about iron. But then when they separated out the studies and they compared heme iron, which comes from poultry, beef, seafood, and all the animal products, and they compared it to plant-based iron, they realized, well, it's not the iron that's cardiovascularly protective, it's the iron that comes from plants that's cardiovascular protective. In fact, the heme iron that comes from animals causes oxidative stress and oxidative damage. So then we found out, oh, well, then it's not a good idea to get a whole bunch of iron if it's coming from animals. And yes, it could be perhaps the fact that it's absorbed differently, and it doesn't overwhelm your system and everything. So even though in the past there used to be this worry that vegans aren't getting enough iron, and now we know that we're actually getting plenty of iron, because most of the iron actually comes from plant-based foods. And not only that, not only are we not deficient in iron, we're getting a superior form of iron. So there's just really no worry.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. And so, and same thing with, and the last thing I want to talk about on this topic is also with phosphorus. There was some research by, his name is Dr. McCarty. He does a lot of studies, particularly in the Medical Hypothesis Journal, and he has this really nice paper that talks about the low phosphorus bioavailability of a plant-based diet and how that could actually be protective. Whereas phosphorus from an animal-based diet tends to be more bioavailable, and we can overconsume it. And I just wanted to kind of, mention that as well, as far as this whole bioavailability thing. I think it's important to know that it's important that we absorb adequate nutrition, but I also think the benefit is that the plant-based diet with fiber, as well as other, factors, it seems to modulate what we absorb and what we don't. And I think that's really remarkable.
Exactly. And I think, Yvonne, I mean, this is completely my theory, but I think that goes back to fiber. And I think it's that fiber in the plant-based foods that can modulate all that and control all of that, and basically control that we don't get too much of a
Yes, and I also
good
think
thing.
that fiber is the calorie counting equalizer. And what I mean by that is, and I made video on this, I've made many videos on this, but I personally don't believe in counting calories. I believe in making our calories count. And what I mean by that is, what we read on a
Yes.
label of a processed food, we have to read it because our body's probably going to absorb most of that. But what we read on a whole food, plant-based food, it's a totally different ball game when it enters our body. There's the like, you know what I mean? Like,
Oh, I love that. Yes.
Like for instance,
Yes.
nuts. I think like
Yes.
they have a low metabolizable energy. They have like some of the fats are fiber bound. So there's like we lose a lot of the calories, you know, like through the stool, and we also lose them in other ways. And that's why I love a plant-based diet, because I really never have to count calories. I mean, yes, I'm aware of calories, of course, but it's not like some added stress where I have to do that to track calories. You know, it's because I also think that fiber also
Totally.
not only does it help with everything you just said, but it's also a key satiety signal too. It's so that helps regulate.
Totally, yes.
It actually helps count calories for us because it tells us when we're full. You know, like it helps regulate our
Yes.
appetite. You know, so we don't have to count and still be
Yes.
hungry. Like
Yes.
it's just the whole thing's amazing. So.
Yes, I love, thanks for talking about calories. I love calories, and in the old days we used to think calories in equal to calories out, right? I mean, we know now that that's just such a, that was wrong. Basically, we were wrong. Calories in do not equal to calories out. And so when you look at it, processed food in a box, those calories, yes, every single one gets absorbed. Not only that, you're going to get deleterious effect of the subsequent metabolic processes that are involved when you eat that processed food, because then suddenly you have an insulin spike, glucose spike. So the glycemic index of that food is different than if you had something good. Not only that, the actual effects of it on the GI tract, even before it gets into your blood, is different because it's going to feed the bad bacteria, and you're going to get hormonal dysregulations from that too. So, I mean, it has, when you eat processed food in a box or any animal foods, you are getting so many harmful effects that it's well beyond the calories that are listed on that food. So yeah, calories in do not equal to calories out. And so on the other hand, if you're eating good foods, it's like you can eat so much more of it. And even though, say for example, something like if you pick up a Persian cucumber, this little Persian cucumber is 10 calories, it's like, you could eat 100 of them. And the thing is that it's just going to keep you satisfied because it has a lot of volume, 70% water, and it has a lot of fiber. So if you think about that, one cucumber, that's 10 calories. Your body has to work so hard to digest that. So the peristalsis, like the movement of the GI tract that goes into taking that 10 calorie food and break it down, is probably 20 calorie equivalent, right? So that's how you can eat as much plant-based foods as you want and not gain weight or gain fat, because the calories are not the same as something processed or an animal product.
Right, and the way I like to think of it is when the calories, when you eat processed calories, they've already been processed, so your body, they can absorb so much easier with less work, whereas when you eat calories that are unprocessed, like foods that are raw or plant-based, that your body has to process them because they're unprocessed. And for instance, even eating oatmeal that's overcooked versus al dente, right? So when it's al dente, it's a little more firmer.
Yes.
And so your body has to kind of break down those cell walls,
Yes.
a little more work doing that, right? You know what I mean? So
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. I mean, in our society, we overcook and we just do all kinds of things to process foods and make it easier, but it's not the best way of doing it. For example,
Yes.
we juice a lot, right? We take these really good vegetables and we juice them. And my thought is, why? There is, when you chew food, like nature didn't come with a blender. Nature doesn't come with a juicer. Eat your food, chew your food. Like when you juice vegetables, you don't have the same effect, because when you're chewing the food, there's nitric oxide production. There's studies that show that actually when you chew the vegetable, you have production of nitric oxide, which improves the endothelial function in your body and dilates your blood vessels, improves the perfusion of the blood. So why blend stuff? It's like, let's not do that, So yeah, I agree
fantastic.
with you in that.
And also, in regards to what we were saying, this is a little pun. I'm pretty good with the puns, so I want to throw this one in. But when you said eating out of a box, and how that's not the best thing, and I think people need to start thinking outside the box a little, so.
Yes, exactly.
All right, so what we're saying is, so the next thing is the more fiber of fiber. I want to get into that, and the forgotten macro. We already touched on that. We already know how important fiber is. We've already touched on that. And what I wanted to ask you is, do you know what and I think you actually mentioned this. I think you said it was less than 15. I thought it was 10 to 15 grams a day. But what's the? Do you know what the average intake of fiber is for most Americans? Like, do you have any
Yes, I just actually listened to one of the experts, in the field, and she was saying the studies show that most Americans don't even get the 15,
Okay.
and that's supposed to be the bare minimum. And what I suggest to my patients and those who are not eating a whole food plant-based diet, I tell them, listen, okay, if you're not going to go 100% whole food plant-based, just remember at least get 50 grams of fiber. What happens when you do that is they end up crowding out the bad stuff, like the meats and the dairy products, So if you give them a goal of hitting 15 grams a day, it's really hard to fit all these other bad stuff on their plate. But yeah, so 50 grams should be the goal. For me, it's more like 80 grams, because some of the studies with brain health showed that those people were eating up to 80 grams a day. And also, I mean, if you think about the Paleogenic era, some of the studies show that those guys were eating actually up to 80 grams of fiber per day. So, I think our GI tract, it's more of an herbivore GI tract. And, we need to be eating a lot of fiber-rich foods, a lot of vegetables, a lot of fruits. And unfortunately, we're doing the exact opposite, right? And that's why we have so much cancer and disease and all kinds of problems.
Thank you for that. That's so true. You said 50 grams is ideal, right? 50? Okay, but
Yes,
like 50 to 80 is the
perfect,
range
yeah.
hit there?
50 to 80 is definitely above what the RDA recommends, but remember, the RDA is trying to be so practical, right? You can't take a nation who's eating processed foods all the time and lives on fast food and tell them eat 80 grams a day. They're just going to be like, what? It's just almost impossible. So they are trying to basically hit the very bare minimum levels. And with that, they say, okay,
yes.
15 to 30, right? But that's not ideal, right? That's not ideal. I mean, Americans aren't even eating 15 of it, which is sad, really sad. But they're not definitely not getting 30. But if you really want to be super healthy, okay, and not just go with what the RDA says, get 50 to 80. That's why the folks who eat a whole food plant-based diet are so healthy, because they are getting that. It's easy to get that when you're all living on live, basically these yummy, fresh, non-processed whole foods that grew from the ground with all the nutrients, and they have all this fiber, and it's just so wonderful. And I just don't even know how to, now that I've gone whole food plant-based, I don't even know how to live any other way, because it's just the most wonderful way of eating, and it feels good, it feels fresh, it feels
I totally agree with you. And
amazing.
I feel the same way. I mean, my energy is always at a nice, if it's not high, it's balanced. And I mean, I just really enjoy it. And it also takes the stress out of eating, quite frankly. Unless I'm eating on a place that isn't plant-based.
Yes.
Then it's a little more challenging. But I mean, I totally agree with you. Now we're almost finished. I got just 2 questions left. The question is, are there some people who can't tolerate fiber? And what I mean by that is, I'm not talking about the rare, genetic situation where it's like maybe less than 1% of somebody. I'm talking about people who maybe get gassy or bloated eating fiber. And I think that, and
Yes.
I mean, I might,
Yes.
I don't think I'll steal your thunder at all, but I think it's partly because of their imbalanced gut flora environment and the inability to break the gut bacteria or to break down polysaccharides, or they have too few of those bacteria, and so there is an inability to properly, I guess, metabolize, and so
That's exactly right.
my thought is, and I've always talked about this, like I think people who are coming off of a processed, high animal product diet, that they need to kind of wean their way into it, to kind of allow colonization to occur slowly, which takes time. So can you?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely, it takes time. So that's what I always tell patients. I say, your goal is this, but don't get discouraged when you get bloated, because it's inevitable. I mean, if you when you don't have the proper gut bacteria flora to break down food, as you alluded to, I mean, you just can't, you don't have that proper gut bacteria. And so there's good bacteria and there's bad bacteria in the gut. So for people who don't who are not familiar with that, think of it as two populations. The population that's the quote-unquote bad bacteria likes to eat dairy and eggs and beef and meat. Okay, the good guys feed off of fiber. So now if you take the standard American diet that doesn't even give you 15 grams of fiber a day, you just don't have enough of the good gut bacterial population to break this stuff down, right? So when you get in there, when this food gets into the small bowel, the bacteria is like, we don't know what to do. Part of it gets digested because of the, what happens is the pancreas produces enzymes to break down this food, but the digestive enzymes are not the only part of digestion. A lot of this digestion and processing is through the gut bacteria, and if you don't have the proper gut bacteria, what's going to happen is you're going to get bloated and gassy. So don't give up. That's the basically bottom line, is just, if that happens, slowly ease your way into more and more fiber per day. Here's a good test. This is totally not scientifically proven, but I tell my patients, I ask my patients, I go, what happens if you had a half a can of beans? And the ones who have a terrible gut bacteria balance, they're like, oh, I just stay away from beans. I couldn't eat any beans. If I had a half a can of beans, I'd look pregnant all day. And right then and there, I know that they just don't have a good gut bacteria. Because Yvonne, you and I could probably have 3 cans of beans and no bloating, maybe just a little bit. But yeah, exactly. I don't even know what that means, bloating, because for the past 3 years, I haven't had it. I did before I went whole food plant-based. I had tons of bloating when I had beans and fiber. But so yeah, it's basically, bloating is basically maldigestion of the polysaccharides or anything else that's any other food that's going in there, and the body's like, how do we break this down? We don't have the tools to break this down. So then what happens is there's all kinds of fermentation, the basically methane gas production, CO2 production, hydrogen gas production, and then your gut basically balloons out, like inflated with air and gases. Okay, so that's what happens, and pretty much bloating happens. However, if you have proper digestion, you don't have that, basically gas and bloating. So yeah, ease your way into it. Eat 10 grams a day for a few days, then increase to 15 grams a day of fiber for a few days, then slowly go to 20, 25, 30, and then within 6 months, Yvonne, I've noticed it takes between 3 to 6 months to regulate the gut bacteria. This is totally my experience in my clinic. Up to 6 months, depending on how good the gut bacteria balance is to begin with. And within 6 months, I've
Wow, that was
seen
beautiful.
patients
Thank you
do
so much,
just
Dr.
fine.
Angie. That was very precise, clear. You answered questions that I didn't even have written down, but it was awesome. So I wanted to mention something.
You're the best. Thank you, Yvonne.
I wanted to
You're good
mention
for my
something that's cool
confidence.
because here I am, Mr. Personal Trainer, and I also think that, for instance, when you're slowly weaning someone into increasing their fiber intake, and their gut bacteria isn't colonized for that, and they do get some gas and bloating, would you think that exercising a little more and also cutting down on sedentary time, because particularly circadian rhythm training, what I mean by that is perhaps after a meal going for a walk to help facilitate, because if you think about it, when you stand up, it's like you're optimizing gravity to potentially help to maybe in theory stimulate peristalsis and help to kind of reduce some of those symptoms of being gassy and bloaty when you're transitioning to a plant-based diet. So the importance of exercise, right? In that transition.
Yes. I just, you're brilliant in that regard, and I honestly don't have much knowledge in that regard, so I'm going to have to defer to you. I've actually never heard of this, and I think it sounds really good.
Yeah, I just think
I would
that
love to hear more about that.
Because like you said it could be the CNS, the central nervous system, that could be responsible for the peristalsis, because it's basically a circadian-based thing. It's involuntary from what I understand, and it has to do with when food enters the the tract, a bolus, if you will, or I forget what it's called, but and it stimulates the movement, because you have a meal that's in the colon, and then you have another meal that's entering the esophagus into the stomach, and so it's a cycle. And I think exercise can help to, like I said, in theory, because exercise does stimulate the central nervous system, the sympathetic nervous system actually, and I think that could be helpful for people. I used to have those symptoms myself. I used to have digestive issues. And I did elimination diets back then. I cut out gluten a little bit more, and I think you interviewed doctor. I forget his name. He wrote the fiber. Yeah, and he talked. It was a fascinating comment he made about the low FODMAP diet and how it helps temporarily to kind of maybe help someone transition, but it could actually decrease some of the good bacteria, because a lot of the FODMAPs are like a lot of the superfoods that have fiber. And so it was a little bit of a conundrum or paradox when I saw low FODMAP, because I was like, okay, that's cool, but these are a lot of super healthy foods, and it just didn't make it.
Oh yeah, I mean, I was shocked when I looked at that list. I was like, really? I'm not going to give up all these vitamin-rich, nutrient-rich foods.
Okay, so the last.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'd like
it's
to.
just temporary.
I guess my last question is ulcerative colitis. In general, what is it, and what's the best treatment for it? And I have about 4 minutes left, so.
Yeah, ulcerative colitis is basically a mucosal disease. It's a superficial mucosal disease, and it involves the colon, usually from anus all the way to the top of the colon and cecum. It's unlike Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis causes inflammation in the very superficial mucosa of the colon, and it's not basically transmural, or it doesn't encompass the entire thickness of the colon. Ulcerative colitis has been thought to be related to bacteria, so that's why certain antibiotics actually studies have shown metronidazole or flagyl, which can kill a certain population of bacteria, can be helpful in treating ulcerative colitis. So since that research where metronidazole was helpful in treating ulcerative colitis, people have thought, wow, perhaps gut bacteria balance has a lot to do with ulcerative colitis. And we also know that whole food plant-based diets are very helpful in treating ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease or inflammatory bowel disease in general. Therefore, again, Yvonne, it's like so funny how everything, like every disease you can think of, people do well. If we go back to the whole food plant-based diet again, it probably has to do with the fiber and the good bacteria balance. So it's hard to get ulcerative colitis or Crohn's disease if you're on a healthy whole food plant-based diet. You're not eating processed food, which is not feeding your bad bacteria. You're not eating, you're eating plenty of fiber and whole foods and plant-based foods, which are feeding the good gut bacteria. Now, once you have the ulcerative colitis, it's very hard to put people in remission and take away the inflammation.
Okay.
So oftentimes I use medicines to do that, especially if it's severe enough where they're gonna die. But you know, again, I tell them, go on a whole food plant-based. I had a patient who actually got cured from it. He was in remission and went back to eating meat. And guess what happened? He flared up. And the second time when he started a whole food plant-based diet, he's still not getting into remission. So I have to use the big guns, the big medicines, the immunosuppressants. And he's now eating a whole food plant-based diet.
Okay.
Hopefully he won't have another rebound. But yeah, again, it goes back to eating healthy.
Thank you so much, Dr. Angie. Thank you for your time and the opportunity to do this with you. This was fantastic. And can you tell people the best way that they can find or reach you?
Yes, I'm very active on Instagram, Angie.Sadeghi, Angie.Sadeghi. I am also trying to build my YouTube following, so please subscribe to my YouTube channel so you never miss a video, and I will hopefully do more interviews with Ivan, and I look forward to picking his brain about exercise physiology. So my YouTube channel is Angie Sadeghi, A-N-G-I-E-S-A-D-E-G-H-I-M-D.
All right, guys, you heard it here first. Go over and check out Dr. Angie's channel. Check out her Instagram. She's an unbelievable individual, unbelievable human being. So knowledgeable and amazing. You've got to see what she looks like. I mean, well, you've seen it already in this picture, this video, but thank you again, Dr. Angie, and thank you.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it very much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. You too.
You're brilliant. Keep up the good work. I love your posts and your knowledge. I really enjoyed following you.